Okay, we have some people joining us already. Before we really get started, I have a poll question up there. If you could take some time to answer the poll question, it just gives us an idea of why you are here today, and it helps us kind of gauge the content that we hope to cover during the presentation as well as during our Q&A. So we're going to give attendees, we already have quite a few on with us. We're going to give attendees about another 30 seconds to jump in before we kick off today's event. And again, thank you to those who have already answered the brief poll question that is on your screen. Okay, let's get started. Welcome to today's Environment and Energy webinar sponsored by Enel. My name is Jessica Hunt, and I'm one of the owners of E&E Leader. And on behalf of the entire team, welcome to Demand Response, an easy win for your decarbonization strategy. Before I turn the mic and cameras over to Marcus and Jennifer, I do want to go over some housekeeping items with all attendees. We are going to have time at the end of the presentation for a Q&A session. So if you have questions for Marcus and Jen at any point during today's event, please submit using the Q&A button that is at the bottom of your screen. There are a couple of resources available for attendees to click on in the resources button. In terms of the questions, if by some chance we do not get the opportunity to answer your specific question during the live event, Marcus, Jennifer, and their team will be following up with answers to all of the questions submitted. So don't worry about that. We do appreciate anybody's or everybody on with us today. We have a truly global audience, and we do appreciate you taking some of your time of your day, some of the time out of your day, excuse me, to spend with us. And for those watching this on demand, thank you for spending time with us as well. The event will be recorded, so you can come back and watch it again. And there will be opportunities to connect with both speakers post live event. And one last point, there will be a survey that pops up at the end of today's event, and we really appreciate any and all feedback. It helps us gauge where we need to make improvements, as well as what you as the audience are looking for in terms of future webinars. So at this point, I am going to turn the presentation over to Marcus and Jennifer, and I will rejoin everyone for the Q&A. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Jessica. So I'm Jennifer Taylor. You've got my bio on the slide, but just a quick additional fact. I live in Las Vegas, which I know to everybody seems like the land of excess, but I am really a proud Nevadan and proud resident of Las Vegas for all of the efficiency measures, sustainability efforts, and renewable energy projects that our major resorts on the Las Vegas Strip have led on. It's really been great to watch how that's all evolved. Additionally, just a fair warning, you may see a black and white cat run across the screen. I apologize for that. That's just my assistant compliance director, who I cannot make comply with the rules about screen time. So with that, I will pass it on to Marcus.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. My name is Marcus Krems, and I lead external relations and sustainability for Enel North America. Been with the company for 9 years and really excited to be here today and share our perspective on the way in which demand response can fit easily and seamlessly into your decarbonization and sustainability strategies. A fun fact about myself relevant for this audience is that I am currently enrolled in 2 utility-sponsored demand response programs, one associated with my smart thermostat that they call Rush Hour, and the other associated with my electric vehicle that promotes off-peak charging based on time of use rates. That is called EV Accelerate. So from a prosumer perspective, I find it very interesting and exciting that as individuals and retail electricity customers that we can also participate where available into demand response programs and use that as an opportunity to educate your family and friends about the role energy plays in our daily lives and mobility. So with that, we'll go into today's agenda. Firstly, we're going to talk about the landscape and the growing need for decarbonization and the increase in how sustainability and sustainable energy strategies are increasingly core to companies' operations goals and how they engage with customers and other stakeholders. We'll give folks who may not be as familiar with demand response a bit of a 101 and primer about these programs, and then we'll similarly provide a high-level overview of sustainability, corporate sustainability strategies and how they align with energy and other decarbonization efforts that organizations make. And we'll conclude by making the case as to why, if you're not already convinced, why demand response should be a key sustained piece of your overall decarbonization and sustainability strategy. Would encourage folks again to drop any questions that they have into the Q&A portal here in the webinar. And if we're unable to get to your questions, of course, as already mentioned, we'll follow up with a digest of all of the Q&A for everyone's benefit. So with that, I want to tell a little bit about who Enel is and give a high-level overview of who we are as a company for folks that may not be familiar with Enel. First and foremost, at Enel, we believe that energy should be flexible and sustainable. Within North America, we combine the spirit of a startup with the infrastructure and expertise of a truly global innovator. Our parent company, Enel Group, is a multinational power company and a leading player in power markets, also the world's largest private operator of renewable energy. And we're also a world leader in demand response and leading provider of DR in North America with just under 5 gigawatts of DR capacity. We're a Fortune 100 energy leader, and we again lead and innovate across our entire demand response portfolio, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a few minutes. And with that portfolio, we are able to scale and provide our expertise and financial stability to all of our customers and partner organizations across North America. And with sustainability being at the center of our business model for many years now, we are really proud about enabling businesses and communities of all sizes to manage energy more efficiently and with flexibility at the center. From a sustainability perspective, we also maintain high performance in terms of the main ESG indices, ratings, benchmarks, and in many cases, our leading positions across those various benchmarks. With that, I'd like to pass it over to Jennifer to discuss the growing need for decarbonization and sustainable energy strategies.
Thank you, Marcus. So sustainability and flexibility have really become an imperative for both large energy consumers and the grid. Today's rapidly evolving energy landscape presents commercial and industrial organizations with challenges and opportunities. Factors such as climate change, energy market volatility, stakeholder demands, and regulatory changes are driving the need for energy strategies focused on decarbonization. Developing a strong strategy, implementing tangible measures, and choosing suitable energy solutions to help you achieve your targets are all essential for enhancing your brand reputation and competitiveness, as well as managing your own energy costs. The grid is also facing its own set of challenges, from energy reliability concerns to ensuring enough supply to meet growing demand. And this is all while doing it cost effectively, because our traditional sources of generation, such as peaker plants, they're expensive to build and maintain, and they run on fossil fuels. So let's take a look at some of these factors a little more closely. Rising demand is challenging the grid. In particular, we've got data centers and manufacturing. They're heavy energy consumers. They're increasing the load on the grid to meet the growth in things like AI and the demand for goods. This diagram from Wood Mackenzie shows anticipated large load growth by region in the US from 2024 to 2027, with the largest demand spikes being in the wholesale markets in Texas, which is ERCOT, and the East Coast. I saw that there's some folks on from Pennsylvania, being in the wholesale market that's known as PJM, which is called the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland Interconnection, and then the bulk power system reliability region known as the Southeastern Electric Reliability Council, or CERC. It's important to note load growth as a challenge because bringing new generation online, as I mentioned, has become increasingly difficult in many regions. In recent capacity auctions like MISO and PJM, we've seen a retiring of coal-fired plants but there's not new generation to replace that lost capacity. So new sources of capacity, in particular, the build out of new renewable projects that are essential to the clean energy transition, is not keeping pace with projected load growth. Additionally, and unfortunately, many projects are sitting in interconnection queues. Because of this, sorry about that, you guys. It's growing clear that we need to be more efficient with resources that we already have, and in particular, leveraging flexible assets to participate in grid programs like demand response. So let's take a look at another factor that's putting strain on the grid, and that's extreme weather. Sustainable ways of using energy and sustainable sources of energy are becoming imperative to address the impacts of climate change and to ensure energy continuity during extreme events. This chart you're looking at, or this graph you're looking at, is 2023 data, and it's already out of date, but you can anticipate that it's an ongoing trend. This actually could have been from August, and it would already be out of date because of the extreme weather systems we're getting with hurricanes Helene and Milton. Extreme weather events can strain the grid with surges in energy demand, like AC units needed to stay cool where you have heat domes, or heaters to stay warm where you have extreme winter events. This raises concerns about potential blackouts and puts additional stress on utilities. So our flexible resources, like demand response, are playing a critical role in maintaining grid stability and preventing blackouts during these extreme weather events. And this is really an urgent need now, as NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information, or NCEI, confirmed in their 2023 billion-dollar disaster report last year was a historic year in the number of costly disasters and extremes throughout much of the country. There were 28 weather and climate disasters in 2023, which surpassed the previous record of 22 weather and climate disasters in 2020. And those 2023 disasters tallied a price tag of at least $92.9 billion. This total annual cost may rise by several billion once 2023 has been fully assessed, and the costs of the December 16th through 18th East Coast storm and flooding event that impacted states from Florida to Maine is fully accounted for. So let's take a look at demand response and how it overlays with supply. So when you need to address supply concerns, it's a lot more efficient for grid operators to pay large energy users to use less energy than, again, for them to construct peaking power plants. Those power plants would sit idle nearly all year, and they would just turn on for 2 to 3 hours during emergency events. By being flexible with your load and curtailing electricity, there's further benefits than just earning payments. Customers are also strengthening the grid and increasing sustainability while improving their own operational reliability. So taking a look at this slide here, which is one of my favorite slides to demonstrate how beneficial demand response is. This shows the comparison of the energy demand on a given day versus the available generation capacity. The highlighted red days are showing demand nearly exceeding 100% of the supply that's available. These are the situations that could ultimately cause a blackout. So aside from those summer highlighted days, you're able to see how rare it is for a given day to cross that dangerous threshold. It's an indicator of how important and vital load flexibility is. More than 10% of grid infrastructure costs are spent to meet that peak demand, which traditionally occurs less than 1% of the time. If you're able to be flexible with your load, you can help decrease emissions and help the grid remain stable for your local community. So managing demand-side resources and flexible loads is a recognized piece of the puzzle to support grid stability and load growth. We're seeing more and more states adopt policies that encourage organizations to provide that capacity to the grid. As such, grid operators are launching demand response programs, enabling aggregation of flexible resources. One of the latest states to approve that type of an aggregation is Wisconsin, which is in the Midwestern wholesale market known as the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO. Some utilities are even partnering one-on-one with demand response aggregators like Enel to launch exclusive demand response programs to their customers by offering support at a localized level. You can see in this map Enel's demand response footprint, where we participate in both wholesale markets and where we've partnered with utilities to offer bilateral demand response programs. But there's a lot of work to be done still. You can see a lot of gray space, lots of work to promote the value of demand response in regions where commercial and industrial DR programs do not currently exist. Many organizations have large loads that can offer the needed grid support that we've been talking about. And here at Enel, we would really love to help color in every state on this map to show nationwide DR opportunities. And so with that, let me talk a little bit about demand response. And for those who may be unfamiliar with it, let's do a quick recap about what this flexible solution entails. Demand response is a program that pays facilities to curtail their electricity usage to stabilize the grid during times of extreme strain. That could mean anything from weather disturbances, energy pricing, or unexpected system issues like a down transmission line. These are called demand response events or dispatches. Participating in demand response not only gives organizations the opportunity to earn a revenue stream through the events and audits, but it also allows them to protect their equipment from brownouts, blackouts, or voltage constraint if the system-wide strain would continue to escalate. So this slide again shows that small curve where demand is outpacing supply and how demand response can shave that demand to prevent that grid stress and to support reliability. This is another visual representation of how demand response contributes to conservation efforts when the grid is strained. You can see in this diagram how an organization can be flexible with energy usage to conserve energy at a time when the grid is strained. So you see the baseline demand in that sort of lighter blue, and then once there is a directive called or a demand response event called, you can see the response drops the demand down into that reduction target area, and then when the event is over, you'll see that it's able to be back restored to the normal demand. So as I sort of described, what happens is organizations receive that alert of an upcoming DR event, they reduce energy consumption to a predetermined amount, and then they remain at that level for the event duration. This flexibility has value to the grid and to DR participants. The grid gets to avoid firing up fossil fuel powered peaker plants, and organizations can attribute these energy conservation efforts towards avoided emissions. So let me highlight the PJM market for a little bit for several reasons. And again, I noticed there's some folks on here from Pennsylvania, so really happy to be able to share with you everything that's going on, and well, not everything, but the highlights of what's going on at PJM. The first reason I want to highlight PJM is that it's really a recent example of challenges facing the grid. PJM is the largest grid operator in the US. It manages electricity transmission across 13 states and Washington, D.C. In PJM's recent base residual auction, that's what determines capacity needs and pricing for the 2025-2026 delivery year. We witnessed the tightest supply and demand balance in PJM in years. This was caused by two factors we've already discussed. Number one was a decline in supply from fossil fuel powered plants retiring with no replacement generation assets ready, and new resource accreditation rules that were derating resources. This is a direct result of Winter Storm Elliott in 2022, when supplies like gas lines froze and then couldn't deliver that capacity they had promised. Then we have rising demand that I showed you on that earlier slide, and you saw the really extreme spike in demand requirements, and it's on this slide as well. You can see from the auction for 2025-2026. PJM is very heavy with manufacturing facilities and data centers, and so PJM is forecasting that demand will continue to rise over the next 15 years. As a result of those items, of those two issues, we saw capacity pricing rise, especially in two territories. One was the Baltimore Gas and Electric Territory in Maryland, and then Dominion in Virginia and North Carolina. So let's take a look back at some events that some weather events that show how DR can be beneficial in those types of extreme weather situations. So here's some examples showcasing the importance of flexibility with the load and how demand response helped to maintain reliability on the grid for modern energy management in these events. So September 2022, there was the extreme heat wave in California. It really tested the grid's resilience as an energy demand surged. Demand response was able to play a vital role in balancing the grid by encouraging participants to lower electricity usage during peak periods. This collective effort helped avert potential blackouts and maintained grid reliability during the heat wave. For Winter Storm Elliott in December 2022, same kind of concept. There was the deep freeze that caused several power plants to go offline. In this emergency, demand response provided critical support, enabling the grid to maintain balance by reducing consumption and reallocating power where it was most needed. The ability of DR to make those swift adjustments helped restore stability and prevent widespread power outages. Last summer, July of 2023, we saw again a massive heat wave in Texas, and demand response was called on to be a crucial part of the resource mix that helped avoid grid emergencies. As temperatures soared and air conditioning use spiked, demand response programs incentivized companies to reduce electricity usage during peak hours, and that helped to ease the strain on the grid and prevent blackouts. And then this summer, there's a formidable heat dome that settled over a significant portion of the nation, driving temperatures to levels not seen in 30 years. And I would argue in some places like Las Vegas, it's still sort of sitting here. ISOs across the US leveraged demand response in their action plan to ensure grid continuity as demand continued to skyrocket. This is a chart that we'll talk about in terms of showing those demand response events and how they're increasing in frequency. So we know that based on those extreme weather events, based on growing load, based on shrinking supply, the grid really needs demand response more now than ever. These factors are driving an increase in the grid calling on demand response resources during times of need. So you can see this increase visually represented in the line chart, and it shows demand response events from 2015 through 2024 that Enel has witnessed and been part of. You'll see how much 2024 has spiked in terms of the number of dispatches, and it's key to remember 2024 isn't even over yet. So we know that this is going to be a record year for DR events being called. The beauty of demand response is that it incentivizes more flexible and efficient use of existing assets. And most organizations have flexible elements of their operations that can be part of a demand response curtailment plan. So think about your own facilities infrastructure. Strategies like turning off unnecessary lighting, raising HVAC set points, and reducing production lines are classic examples of energy flexibility that you can monetize and attribute to carbon reduction efforts. Going back to what Marcus mentioned in terms of his fun fact, you see this with residential customers for utilities where there may be smart thermostats that get installed, and the utility can call on those residents to reduce some demand during peak times. Demand response at this commercial and industrial level has the same functionality, but at a much larger level of megawatts and at a much larger level of ability to regulate the grid. So as you can see in this slide, depending on your operations, some examples of reduction could be, again, that reduction of your heating and cooling, shutting down or shifting machinery processes, reducing chillers and more in refrigeration processes, and simply reducing your non-ancillary controls such as lighting. Some facilities may choose to do a full shutdown to maximize their earnings. That's an easy option with a compliant generator. But others may focus more on shedding smaller loads that minimize disruption to their operations. What's important with demand response and with looking at your facility is to make sure you're working with a curtailment service provider who's going to work with your specific operations and help you ultimately maximize your earning potential. As an aggregator, we really pride ourselves on developing tailored energy reduction plans specific to the site's load, operation requirements, and industry. You really want to make sure that you're set up for success. And then finally, what types of companies are good candidates for demand response participation? Well, we talked about commercial and industrial companies with large energy loads, loads that are predictable. So we're talking about industries like manufacturing, cold storage, data centers, and mining. They can make energy reductions without significant disruptions to their businesses. They can reduce by at least 100 kilowatts. However, that's going to range from region to region and industry to industry. So for instance, a large industrial site in PJM could typically curtail several megawatts, whereas a site in New England may only be able to do a few hundred kilowatts. It's important to note, though, that all of this is made easier if you have a building management system. Companies can automate then how they participate in DR, access more lucrative programs by being able to quickly respond, and also make energy efficiency improvements across their site. It's best to talk to a professional like Enel to see if your site would be a good candidate for demand response programs and how your site can be customized to maximize those opportunities and set you up for success. So with that overview of Demand Response 101, I'm going to pass it back over to Marcus.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. And, wanted to pivot the next portion of this conversation with all of you today around connecting the opportunity of demand response into organizations' corporate sustainability and decarbonization strategies. So first, we'll talk a little bit about the basics of defining corporate sustainability, what that entails, and ensuring that the organization that you represent are mapping your high priority issues relevant to your organization and, of course, to your stakeholders, while effectively managing risks and taking advantage of those upside opportunities that Jennifer just articulated around demand response specifically, and how that ultimately connects to your decarbonization and low carbon business models. We know today that over 8,000 companies, or 1/3 of the global economy, have committed to science-based targets or have had targets independently verified to the Science Based Targets Initiative, which is the organization that warehouses and provides guidance for companies related to low carbon business models and scenario planning. That represents 22% of all listed companies as of May 31st of this year. And according to MSCI, we have 29 months remaining for those listed companies to reduce emissions and limit global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Pretty stark to think about it in those terms, which is why the emphasis that we've been promoting is around how to accelerate and responsibly integrate these strategies into your company's decarbonization roadmaps and sustainability strategies. So how are those two topics intertwined? Of course, there are core economic benefits, no doubt, related to reducing energy costs while basically getting a check in the mail and generating revenue from those participation in DR events. Of course, those come with conservation and energy efficiency benefits, which can then be translated into carbon emission benefits within your own organization's low carbon or decarbonization plan. And with those come a variety of co-benefits with respect to grid stability, reliability, managing risk, and all of the other resilience attributes that go along with those participation and engagement in those events that Jennifer mentioned, of which we've experienced nearly 500 or more than 500 already this year, of which our partner organizations are enjoying revenues from their participation in those same events. Ultimately, those events, looking at it through the lens of corporate sustainability and progress towards targets around climate and energy, this table illustrates the increasing and growing complexities with regards to carbon accounting and reporting, particularly around Scope 2 emissions, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. But there are, for US listed companies, there's the expectation that the Securities and Exchange Commission will publish guidance for disclosure on carbon emissions. And globally, there is already regulation and law for EU listed companies and their subsidiaries to disclose climate and many other aspects of a company's environmental, social, and governance activities and related targets. Today, 69% of all listed companies disclose Scope 1 or Scope 2 emissions as of May 31st of this year. That's an increase of about 20% of 2023. So you can see a very strong trend around openly disclosing both scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, and nearly half, or 47%, of all listed companies disclosed some aspect of their scope 3 or supply chain related emissions, and that's up 10% from 2023. So again, we're continuing to see a sustained upswing of companies' disclosure around the management and communication to their stakeholders, including their investors and customers, around progress that they're making to achieve their climate and energy related goals. So when we talk about scopes of emissions, what do we mean when we talk about the various scopes of emissions? We will not dive into the very granular specifics of carbon accounting during this webinar, but at a very high level, when we say scope 1 emissions, we're talking about those emissions that are direct emissions or result from the combustion of fossil fuels. So think your company-owned vehicles, natural gas, or other fuels that may be combusted or utilized within your direct company's control. Separately, scope 2 emissions would be indirect emissions. The largest portion of scope 2 emissions would be resulting from purchased electricity, and that's mainly what we're talking about here, the avoided consumption of electricity impacting positively your scope 2 emissions within your own organization or across your extended supply chain. And last but not least, scope 3 emissions, which for most organizations is the largest proportion of emissions within their inventory or carbon footprint. And that's really around upstream or downstream activities. So if your organization is being invited to participate in a customer's disclosure activity, or you're being encouraged to integrate different climate or energy goals, most likely those organizations are addressing their scope 3 emissions, which in many cases would be your scope 1 or scope 2 emissions. So we can certainly follow up with more around carbon accounting if there are any questions related to those specifics from those participating in today's webinar. So what? So why should demand response be a part of your decarbonization strategy? And as you investigate or deepen the decarbonization solutions that you're inviting or maximizing within your current organization. Obviously the clean energy landscape and available technologies are evolving and getting ever more complex and flexible. And this is because there's a need to comprehensively address the unique challenges that each of our organizations face. There's, of course, a wide range of technologies, from on and off-site solutions to those that offer revenue opportunities like demand response, to those that reduce OpEx and associated carbon emissions. But of course, there's also market factors to consider, incentives and rebates to claim, how to procure these solutions, supply chain issues, and increasingly present regulations. So of course, it is a complex landscape. It can obviously be overwhelming, particularly for organizations with a complex and diverse geographic or markets footprint. So we really recommend taking on the low-hanging fruit first, which we would like to think includes demand response. So, why demand response again? You can first implement it quickly and cost effectively. And unlike more complex and capital intensive projects, it requires very little additional, if any, infrastructure at your site. And as Jennifer mentioned earlier, it leverages existing assets that you already have deployed across your facilities and operations. Participating in demand response or DR programs can also serve as a backbone to your decarbonization strategy, and it can create valuable revenue streams that you can reinvest to implement other solutions as part of your roadmap. It works seamlessly with other solutions in your portfolio. For instance, DR revenue can finance a building management system, which we've also mentioned earlier, if you can leverage unique financing solutions also offered by Enel. Those benefits of a building management system extend beyond just maximizing DR program participation. You can actually use those to overhaul your energy infrastructure, drive efficiencies, and conserve energy. So DR often does go hand in hand with energy efficiency upgrades, lighting, chillers, HVAC motors, etc. and orchestrating those assets within a building management system can drive further efficiencies and automate your participation in demand response programs and maximize your own facilities performance and resilience to those external events and forces. Demand response also paired with solar and battery energy storage for those that are considering or have already adopted those solutions can also amplify the flexibility and decarbonization efforts. For example, by storing solar power generation for later use, you can optimize your consumption of renewables and then dispatch those kilowatt hours during demand response events to ensure continuity of operations. So want to walk through a couple of cases here or benefits. First, demand response incentivizes more efficient energy use to reduce overall demand, which reduces the need for more carbon intensive power generation. It's pretty straightforward. DR programs help to maintain affordable, reliable electricity to power your facility, to keep the grid stable. And as we discussed, there are also cleaner and more effective alternatives to building or relying upon new or existing peakers in your community and within the grid. Your participation directly contributes to that greener peak capacity, helps with reliability and efficiency to avoid the blackouts, which we would all like to avoid, and keeps energy prices stable for everybody. It also helps to reduce your own carbon footprint. We talked about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. And as your facility is being more energy efficient and not drawing energy from the grid during periods of a dirtier fuel mix and avoiding the need to burn those dirtier resources on the grid. And those energy reductions do translate into kilowatts, hours, or even megawatts that you can directly attribute to your carbon reduction efforts while earning revenue. Another main benefit is that with the adoption and increased utilization of these flexible resources, additional renewables can be put on the wires and integrated into the grid. And we all know that renewable energy is essential to the energy transition, with global efforts to triple renewable energy capacity across the globe to at least 11,000 gigawatts by 2030. We've discussed how demand response is helping the independent system operators across PJM, MISO, and others fill the capacity gap as renewable energy projects are increasingly bottlenecked in interconnection queues. And as more renewables integrate into the electricity grid, fossil fuel plants are decommissioned, and demand response is an increasingly important tool to help keep that grid in balance and enabling the energy transition. So while renewables like wind and solar and increasingly batteries are essential to the energy transition, the resource really varies depending upon time and weather. So to address and mitigate the intermittency of renewables, the grid can deploy demand response very quickly in under a second or within minutes to ensure that the grid remains in balance. And the screenshot here demonstrates how these flexible, clean resources come together to deliver capacity to the grid. So as Jennifer mentioned earlier, last summer, there was a heat dome that settled over Texas with record peak demand in Texas, or the ERCOT grid operator, where wind, solar, battery, and demand response resources worked together to ensure that ERCOT remained online during the massive heat wave. And last but not least, participating in demand response enhances your awareness of your own energy infrastructure to help you identify where other opportunities are created and where your consumption behaviors can be influenced across your facility footprint. If your facility has a metering device, for example, you can unlock access to real-time energy usage and demand response performance data. By monitoring and controlling your energy consumption levels in real time, you can optimize energy use and maximize DR performance. We did discuss earlier the utilization of building automation or building management systems, and those can also significantly unlock more opportunities from energy efficiency to better utilization of DR program performance. And if you do not have or would like to explore the opportunity to integrate building management systems into your organization or facilities, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to talk to you about our FlexUp solution, which we can install with zero upfront costs. So as illustrated in the example here, showing really the rollout and impact of representative but common profile of a decarbonization roadmap, energy efficiency mechanisms like DR are almost always implemented first and maintained, serving as the backbone of a company's energy and related decarbonization strategy, with on-site and increasingly off-site renewables playing a more and more important role. And as I mentioned earlier, with regards to scope 3 emissions and your supply chain, the role of enablers or supply chain aggregators are also increasingly important, as many companies' scope 3 emissions with its suppliers are greatly influencing progress towards climate and energy goals, which I suspect many or some of you are experiencing within your own supply chain or with your own main customers. So let's summarize here. Demand response ultimately is a win-win. It earns payments for you, it's essential for the grid, and energy flexibility is crucial to meet energy and climate goals. Participation unlocks quick wins within your organization and drives your decarbonization roadmap forward. It unlocks energy efficiency and revenue opportunities, and the other side of that same coin are those reported carbon reduction benefits that are increasingly important that we accelerate towards if we'd like to remain on a 1.5 degree scenario plan. And participating in these programs and becoming more energy efficient and not drawing energy from the grid when fossil fuels are being burned through the peaker dispatch, those energy reductions are directly attributable to your carbon reduction efforts. So in essence, the cleanest energy is the energy that we do not use. So if you'd like to dig deeper and access additional resources, we would encourage you to dive into one of our widely accessible ebooks for self-guided learning. We have an excellent resource that we collaborated on called the Decarbonization Navigator, a toolkit for organizations that guides you step by step through the steps that we would recommend an organization take to have a robust decarbonization roadmap. It's a very, very excellent educational tool. The second is an ebook which covers many of the same topics that we talked about today, but in a denser format, and talks about how DR can fit into that same decarbonization strategy. And we would strongly recommend that you refer to this as you navigate these opportunities within your organization. And if you would like to dive even deeper, we'd like to invite you to set up a call with a representative of our team. And specifically, if you are within the PJM market that Jennifer discussed earlier, the 11-state region plus Washington, D.C., it's a particularly hot market now for participation, with prices at record levels and the grid in such extreme need for flexible resources. And you don't need to wait until June 1st of next year to raise your hand. Get the conversation started now. So keep in mind that all of these resources are available to you, and we're excited for you to reach out and to answer all of your questions. So I'm going to hand it back over to Jessica now at E&E, and I believe we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. And if we're not able to get to those questions, as we've mentioned, we'll make sure that we send a recap summary of all of our responses. So thank you everyone for your time today. And while we only really just grazed the surface of some of these opportunities and solutions, we're really excited about how increasingly DR fits into companies' overall energy and sustainability strategies. So Jessica, take it away.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you to the questions that have already come in. We had questions come in during the poll, when the poll was up, as well as throughout today's presentation. So I'm going to start with a very basic one, which is, do markets and grid operators generally issue DR dispatches at the time of carbon intensity? Marcus, do you want to jump on that one? And I'll give Jen the next one that comes up.
I'll say that as someone who's not directly involved in the program design for DR, I am aware that there's at least one, if not several, signals that utilities have designed into their programs that are in fact informed and driven by carbon intensity on the grid, and those incentives to reduce demand during those periods are made available through payments, and there is at least one, if not more, corporate that is also self-funding those same efforts to support their carbon-free energy objectives near their facility footprint. So yes, those signals are present both in system managed programs, but also bilateral programs with corporate funded initiatives.
Wonderful. Jennifer, do you have anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to add, I think that as we continue to go through these issues and continue to look at demand response as a way to manage the grid and provide flexibility on the grid, I think that there will be opportunities to continue to talk about how you track that decarbonization and how those signals are sent to dispatch. And that's something that we really look forward to potentially leading on as a policy going forward with utilities and with the markets. It's also something that we're looking at from a program design for being able to sort of track emissions through our platforms like Flex.
Wonderful. No, thank you for that. And I know we had a couple of questions come in about PJM. We have some people here, obviously, within the market. I'm in that market, being outside of DC. So PJM's forecast indicates rising energy demand over the next 15 years. What steps can companies in this market take to ensure that demand response not only helps reduce their operational costs, but also contributes to long-term grid reliability? And I think this is a question too that applies obviously to every single market, but this person specifically asked just about PJM.
Well, I think the first thing that you can do to ensure that demand response helps reduce operational costs and contributes to long-term grid reliability is enroll in a demand response program. That's number one. And number two, I think that looking at, again, demand response really is something that's a win-win for your company and for the grid, and making sure you're maximizing your participation and really strategizing with your provider, like Enel does, and setting up our customers for success in what are the systems that you can shut down. It's worth noting that for PJM, those capacity rates are going to continue to increase. And so demand response revenue can help you offset those while you're helping the grid in PJM. Just again, making sure that we're having as many opportunities as possible to shave load, shift load, curtail load. All of those things are opportunities to stabilize the grid and make sure that as capacity or as supply continues to come online slowly and as transmission continues to come online slowly, that we're taking those steps that we can at a site-by-site level to try to shave off the stress on the grid. I know that's a really broad answer, but I mean, that's the baseline, is enroll in a program and really customize and stretch what you can do in those times of grid emergencies.
So in terms of enrolling in the program, prior to a company actually taking those steps, what are some of the, I would say the top 3 or 4 questions that you are getting prior to the actual enrolling taking place?
That for Marcus or for
Marcus? Yep, I was going to say I'm going to pass that over to Marcus.
So, I think that this question, I would like to refer to some of our program experts so that we can make sure that we're getting the best answers for some of the hurdles or considerations that we're hearing from customers. But I think that, the one that would jump out to me that I've been aware of for a few years is the any disruptions that the enrollments could place on the facility or organization. So really mitigating and having that that load management plan in place with the customer, with the facility, to mitigate those concerns around any perceived interoperability or disruption issues that we're hearing. And then on the other side, it's really how much of income would they be ready to stand to gain from participation and the frequency of those participation or events given a particular time of year. So really the magnitude of participation and what they can stand to gain through those enrollments. And there's lots of ways that aggregators and program administrators can view the sharing of those benefits with enrolled organizations.
No, thank you for that. And I completely understand wanting to bring in some other experts to answer some more specific questions here. So once I'm enrolled in a program, you you mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's pretty quick to get up and running. So what does a typical time frame look like? And is that dependent on the size of your organization? Um, just some of those variables.
Well, sorry, there goes compliance cat. I would, again, there's folks on the demand response team that are really going to be the experts on knowing your market, your program, your industry, what your needs are. But when you look at DR, it's not a program that relies on complex, new CapEx heavy on-site infrastructure. So the timeline can be pretty quick, from agreement to signing and being able ready to respond to a demand response event. It can be timelines from around 6 to 12 weeks. But again, we would really want to bring in the experts that work market by market, industry by industry to talk about that and what your specific facilities look like and your facility needs are.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you for that. And I know, and just a reminder, every question that is submitted today is going to be reviewed by not just Marcus and Jen, but members of their team so that we can have a cohesive answer and a meaningful answer to all of the input from today's attendees. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on to talking about equipment. So we've had a couple questions come in about equipment. Is there any special equipment that you need? And if so, how do you go about getting that? How does Nell work with clients to get it? Marcus, and you want to take this one?
For most cases, there are no upfront costs. There are very small devices or meters that are installed within facilities that allow the monitoring and the activation of those load management interventions. And further, we talked a little bit about the building management systems or building automation solutions. And that is a program that we launched earlier this year in partnership with Honeywell, and can provide additional information and details about that program should anybody want to dive into the specifics of that with our FlexUp sales team.
Wonderful. Jen, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, again, I think this is going to be a great follow-up question for some of our, sales and onboarding folks to provide some additional detail.
Wonderful. Well, I know we are getting close to the top of the hour. Marcus, I'd like to, just ask you, what are some of your 3 big takeaways that you want our attendees to leave with today?
Yeah, first, I would, if I was sitting in the facility manager or even influencer role within an organization, I would view enrollment in DR as a no-brainer and low-hanging fruit for many of the territories or markets that Jennifer talked about, particularly in PJM with the rising clearing price for capacity payments in 2025 and 2026. From a sustainability perspective, the ability to claim and report the avoided energy consumption from those same activities are fundamental within organizations' decarbonization plans and roadmaps. So, hopefully the concepts around demand response and load flexibility are becoming less foreign, less complex, more understandable and accessible. And those are some of the barriers and opportunities that we're seeking to promote and advocate for. And then finally, it's urgency. It's don't wait for some other major event or some other stressor to occur within your facility or within or at grid scale for that matter. Reach out to an expert, be guided through the process, and then make an informed decision, whether that's motivated, by economics, by climate, by energy management, by the other reinvestment scenarios we discussed. But there are, numerous different use cases and value propositions for enrolling in demand response programs.
No, fantastic, fantastic advice there. And Jen, I'm going to pass it over to you before we close it up for the day.
Same, really would echo a lot of what Marcus said. Demand response is an opportunity to really be a team player on your grid, and to really support what your utilities and what your wholesale markets are doing and trying to protect in terms of reliability it's a great low-hanging fruit opportunity for both revenue and carbon emissions. As Marcus said earlier in the meeting, or earlier in our webinar, the cleanest, cheapest energy is the energy you don't use. We talked about that, we've talked about that for years with the energy efficiency concepts, but demand response is the same concept. You're reducing load, you're reducing usage, and so you really are able to then help grids decarbonize and help grids be reliable. And there's a place for DR participation for really so many different industries, that it's something that is worth taking a look at to meet your revenue, your efficiency, and your carbon reduction goals.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better myself. So thank you both for a fantastic event today. And I do encourage anybody that is still on with us, if you have more specific questions, like some of the ones that we have received today, please feel free to fill them out when the survey pops in on your screen. And don't worry, the team's going to get all of the data from today's event so they can make sure that they answer all the questions that you have. And also you can reach out to them to schedule additional time to speak. So thank you, Jen and Marcus and your entire team at Enel. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys. And at this point, I'm going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you to our attendees for being here today.
Thanks for having us.